The evidence was building fast. It was no longer safe to stay in old England. Years of government austerity measures had seen the police, MI5 and the British Army replaced with a plastic replica of Henry VIII, which, robust at the shoulder though he appeared, was clearly lacking appropriate armament, adequate mobility and any meaningful intelligence. The terrorist community, marvelling at their luck and laughing all the way to the Kalashnikov shop, was ready to indulge in an unchallenged field day, and we weren't about to stick around and become its victims. Fortunately, at that very moment, the French, despite their historic role as our natural enemy, steamed into view to save the day. Their new toy, the liquefied natural gas-powered ship Santona, opened her gaping mouth and ushered us in to the security of her bows with the promise of a comfortable 2-night voyage, greenwashing us across the Bay of Biscay to Spain's stunning Santander, safety and sunshine, leaving our bellies full of fast food and watery beer, and our wallets so much lighter as to be almost weightless. On landing, we decided on a quick tarmac blast west from a cloudy but uncharacteristically dry Santander, then planning to sneak south through the towering peaks of the Picos de Europa. The aim was to reach Portugal's Bragança in a day, avoiding all major roads, motorways and other humans. A run of around 500 kilometres or roughly 310 imperial miles. Given the likelihood that there would be a need to stop and take photos, stop and drink, stop and eat, stop and feel lost, stop to perform go-arounds, stop for breakdowns due to riding such untrustworthy steeds, and stop to manage whatever other distractions and complications might appear. And that's pretty much how it turned out. We ran out of the will to continue a few clicks short of our target at the foot of the walled town of Puebla de Sanabria. This place, close to the Portuguese border in the Spanish region of Zamora, had a violent and bloody past, but things had more or less settled down by the time of our arrival. So, having secured comfortable lodging for ourselves and our gasping mounts at the posh local parador, we set out on foot to discover more of our whereabouts. Crossing the wide Rio Terra, we were confronted with a great flight of ancient steps, apparently leading to the old walled town. This being our first night on foreign soil, we were yet to discover that great flights of ancient steps would become a regular feature of our adventure, so we therefore decided to climb these steps in case they were the last we ever encountered. At the top, we were confronted with a delightful old town square filled with a great throng of people milling about in the evening light. Additional to them was a group of Guardia Civil, the handsome, brave, smartly liveried, well-armed and notoriously well-educated branch of the Spanish police. Something was clearly afoot. Noting the blazing lights from within the open town hall and the signage for Centro Electoral, we now had an explanation for the numerous banners and placards we'd witnessed hanging from the lampposts for the previous 100 kilometres or so, depicting besuited gentlemen whose smiles were apparently generated by artificial intelligence, given that they were all sporting exactly the same friendly, incorruptible expression. They were, of course, would-be or existing politicians, all vying to win or retain their privileged positions as spokespersons for the good people of that region. And tonight was the night. Apart from casting their votes, however, the primary focus seemed to be on getting together in the cool evening air, eating, drinking and chatting noisily. So, rather than a seething underbelly of revolutionary fervour or political discord, it seemed more like a typical Spanish evening out for the local populace. Or was the fearsome presence of the valiant Guardia Civil keeping a lid on simmering tensions? We would never find out, as we chose a nearby hostelry and dived in for some platters of local fare and much appreciated cold beers. The next morning dawned as mornings tend to. From our hotel balcony, the weather held pleasant promise, so we upped and hit the road to cross into Portugal and enter Bragança. We stopped at old Braganza's castle to take a few snaps, a location chosen because it also marked the start of what would be at least 5 days of largely off-road tomfoolery in a generally southerly direction, the ultimate intent being a reviving dip in the Atlantic as it lapped against the Algarve's balmy coastline. What could possibly go wrong? On the very first lane of the day, we came across 2 most agreeable tastes of beautiful and friendly Portugal, giving the probably delusional impression that all things rural were still rooted in a gentle, slow-motion time long since forgotten back home. First came an encounter with an aged farmer conducting her donkey cart, moving aside to allow us past with a cheery This event was followed at the lane ends with the discovery of a roof cutter's downpipe fitted with a pre-loved Wellington boot at its foot to direct water away from the wall. Just what the doctor ordered, truly a world away from the horrible hustle and hassle of modern Western life. Our journey continued with many a navigational misstep, the better to hone our skills at turning ludicrously overladen big bikes around on endlessly variable loose surfaces in significant heat. Recent rain had turned some of the terrain particularly slippery beneath our clogged tyres, and as morning turned to afternoon and the heat built, so did ominous thunderheads grow above us, a pattern to be repeated on many of the days to follow. I elected to don a wet weather outer layer, sacrificing the delights of my cooling mesh jacket for the promise of impermeability should the heavens open. Only a small shower ensued, however, followed by a slippery, rutted lane that saw me mistake myself for someone with a modicum of riding skill. Upon failing to disengage the clutch fast enough to stop the driven rear wheels shoving the rut-trapped front into a condition of uncontrolled mayhem, I found myself supermanning through the air at what was fortunately a speed somewhat slower than the aforementioned granny on the donkey cart, but headfirst into a tree. My splendid and invaluable wingman Nozza at this point immediately reached for his first responder kit, which of course, and quite rightly, comprised a camera and bugger all else. The resultant photographs suggest I was wearing a voluminous airbag which had inflated upon impact. Nothing could be further from the truth, thus proving that the camera does indeed lie, since in reality all that had occurred was an uncontrolled impact-induced backclapper of sufficient volume and ferocity to fill my garments with a noxious blend of methane and fear, an odour with which my accomplice would no doubt become increasingly familiar as the days and weeks passed. Although uninjured, and with an undamaged bike except for the inevitable unscrewed mirror, I did acquire an instant headache which stayed with me, albeit with decreasing intensity, for some 48 hours. With the mighty Nozza on hand to assist, the bike was soon recovered to the vertical plane. Excuse me. And we continued for a good 14 minutes before I lost the front once again, this time on a tarmac, off-camber, right-hander, deeply coated in wet sand. Sorry, no pickies this time. The crash felt innocuous enough, despite Nozza assuring me that with the bike once more on its side and sliding whilst I apparently had one leg still aboard and the other splayed out behind me as we gouged a deep foot peg scar into the road, it looked to him as if a serious groin-related and potentially trip-wrecking injury was the highly likely outcome. All was well though, although the other mirror was now unscrewed, and once more my Herculean sidekick helped me right the KTM, and we continued our day. But not before I rang Darcy Bustle to inform her that I was capable of doing the splits despite my advanced years, and should therefore be considered for a future with the Royal Ballet forthwith.
Yeah, no worries. Just hanging back a bit, because I'm chewing a lot of your grit.
Following an apple and water break and removal of what now seemed unnecessary wet gear, our day continued on many long and gateless lanes, leading to a particularly lengthy, fast, flat gravel trail alongside a reservoir into an ever-narrowing valley. Above us, a threatening sky was darkening and growing weirdly more purple by the minute, and all around thunder rumbled as the late afternoon heat increased. Then, far, far down the valley, with mountains all around and a seemingly endless body of water beside us, there was a bolt of lightning not 50 metres from our position, accompanied, in true Hollywood style, by a terrific crack of ear-splitting thunder. With no seconds to count betwixt light and sound, it was clear we were right in the eye of a sudden storm, which immediately delivered biblical rain, interspersed with brutal bullets of ice half the size and twice the weight of golf balls. My inspired choice to use an open-face helmet for this trip meant riding one-handed to afford some protection from this onslaught. Further progress soon became impossible, so we dismounted to don wet gear once more and hide under an already lightning-scorched tree, relying on the old adage that it never strikes twice in the same place. Unlikely under the circumstances, as flashes burst and thunder crackled all around us. Given the camera-unfriendly torrential rain, there was sadly no chance to record our escape from this valley of water, fire and ice, but escape was indeed achieved via a particularly steep, rocky, deeply rutted, washed-out ascent that had now more or less turned into a waterfall, complete with rolling rocks. Luckily, having come from the Lake District in the north of England, this challenging trail provided us with the most familiar riding conditions yet encountered, and we flew up and away to relative safety without so much as a dab. Fear and rain blindness are marvellous motivators, rooting out talent where, in reality, at least in my case, little or none exists. Our adventuresome day ended in the town of Torre de Montecorvo, and agreeable quarters were secured at Casa Donna Maria Luisa. Our now filth-caked bikes pavement parked beneath the shelter of a street tree outside the hostel. Beer o'clock was never more welcome, and our relationship with Super Bock was established. This most bearable Portuguese brew would become our regular evening companion throughout our time in this most charming of countries. We'll leave it there for now, and in episode 2 we'll continue with the tale of our journey south on the trails in the direction of cork plantations, vineyards, olive groves, sunshine, more beer, and the sea. Stopping aboard became the primary ambition, at least for the remainder of the Portuguese leg of our trip. Watch the next episode to see how well that went. If you lasted this far, then I congratulate you on your attention span, a rare thing in any measure these days. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!